our assessment is there is generally a lack of political will to deal with corruption, to give the institutions that need to be given independence and resources what they need to investigate and adjudicate corruption. We also find that there are issues in terms of who ends up in certain positions that are crucial in the fight against corruption. In terms of the criminal justice system and so on and so forth. And so our recommendation there is we look into how we inculcate leadership and integrity to ensure that those that we put in to ensure that corruption does not happen in Kenya are the correct people. Another issue we earmarked is irresponsible borrowing. And here we don't have much to say except that there needs to be transparency in terms of how we earmark projects, fund them, and whether we have ways ensuring that they are that what we earmarked as money that we borrowed goes to the right thing. There's also an issue of government wastage generally. This again is underpinned by, as I said again, the duplication of roles between national and county governments, where we have a national government that wants to cater for healthcare issues. At the same time, we have counties that are actually constitutionally mandated to handle healthcare issues. And part of the recommendation here is that the National Assembly and the Senate come up with clear and concise laws that demarcate the roles between national and county governments. And not just that, after that is that to ensure that the various bodies only do what they are required and what they are allowed by law. After that, I'll skim through to the issue of the 2/3 gender rule under the outstanding constitutional issues. And here we don't have much to say except that I think it's a very important constitutional tenet that we gave ourselves in the 2010 Constitution. And we have had various attempts by Parliament and also opinions by courts that have buttressed the need to have the 2/3 gender parity. Here we give the example of the judiciary, where if you look at the number of magistrates, right now their gender parity is 53% women as opposed to 47% men. Overall, from the Supreme Court to the magistracy, you'd find that 47% are women. And the Judicial Service Commission itself has declared that their aim is to reach a 50-50 parity. This illustrates that it is possible to have gender parity or to honor the 2/3 gender rule as per required by our Constitution. And so, how do we do this? We see that the Parliament has made several attempts, the latest being the Duale Bill. Parliament cannot sit properly and sit pretty, that it is properly constituted when we do not have the 2/3 gender rule. As such, it is actually the imperative of our legislature to come up with a formula for elective positions. That said, that does not prevent Parliament from also coming up with legislation on gender parity or 2/3 gender in terms of appointive positions. As I've said before, this has been possible in the judiciary. It can be cascaded through the county governments, the national government, and so on and so forth. The next issue I will jump to is the issue of national inclusion. Just to note that political interests, patronage, nepotism, tribalism has bedeviled this country what informed the 2010 Constitution in terms of its aspirations under the public service provisions under Article 232 to ensure that part of public service is our national diversity in terms of ethnicity, regional balance, and so on and so forth. However, this has not been the case in the national government, in the counties. And we have come up with certain recommendations. We have also decided to perhaps shine a light on the Public Service Commission itself, which is charged with handling the public service in terms of advertising, selecting, interviewing, and hiring. And they have not felt the heat in terms of how certain appointments happen that really do not abide by our plurality as a nation, that everyone from every part of the country should be represented in our public service. And so I think Parliament should find a way in perhaps holding the Public Service Commission more accountable. Apart from that, we should also embed inclusion as part of the performance contracts that most public service officials hold, so that every year you have to show that you have not brought the village to your office, instead that you have brought Kenya to the office to serve all Kenyans. I think going forward we need a proper national audit to ensure that we know which offices, which sectors need some sort of corrective action to ensure that we have the face of Kenya represented in our public service. And I think we should also empower the National Commission on Integration to have some enforcement powers, so that they are not only there to give us data, but there are things that they can do to ensure that that our national and county offices are reflective of the whole nation, including vulnerable people. I'll jump to adequate checks and balances. The Constitution was a resolution by Kenyans to have separation of powers, and part of it was the removal of certain functions from the executive. It also ring-fenced the space of the judiciary, and also to ensure fairness and to ensure that everyone has a say in decision-making, devolved power to the counties. However, since 2010, we've seen an onslaught on constitutional commissions on the judiciary. For commissions, it's come through budget cuts. It's come through outright refusal to replace commissioners. Sometimes it has come through other challenges. For the judiciary, we all know that there have been attempts to amend the law to give the president more leeway in appointment of the Chief Justice. There have been refusal to appoint judges. There have been budget cuts. And so basically there's no real magic bullet in terms of checks and balances, other than fidelity to the Constitution by all actors. Parliament should stick to its lane, the executive should stick to its lane, and we also join the judiciary in praying that they also have an enhancement in terms of their funding. I think currently they sit at 0.6% of the national revenue, and they should be around 3%, 3.5% as earlier espoused. I will jump to the electoral justice part. From our point of view, IBC has really suffered from political sabotage ever since we passed the new constitution. We've had politically instigated removal of officials, and then subsequently we've had officials being, vacancies not being advertised by the appointed bodies that are supposed to do that, leaving the commission to sit without commissioners for a long time. And then we've had appointments that come in too quickly towards an election, so that the commissioners really have not really occupied that office, do not know what is going on. And as such, we've had a situation where there's little faith in the IEBC. Our recommendations is the appointment of commissioners should be made at least 2 years before the general election. Equally, we think there should be a mechanism to stagger recruitment of commissioners, so that at no point do we have a commission that has no commissioners. And then establishing clear roles between the commissioners and the chairperson of the commission, as recommended by the Supreme Court in the presidential petition last year. And also adding the period for hearing and determination of the presidential petition from 14 days to 28 days. On boundary delimitation, we acknowledge that it is a very important facet of our democracy, and we opine that Parliament should enact a separate law dealing with boundary delimitation, separate from how it sits under the IBC Act right now. With regards to the entrenchment of funds under the Constitution, we are again guided by the Supreme Court that found that the NCDF is unconstitutional because it sort of entangles the legislature into expenditure of funds that are not contemplated under the structure of government as we have it. And so I think if the funds need to go to the people, it needs to go either through the national government directly or through the county governments. If it is bursaries that are needed, bursaries per constituency may be earmarked at the county level. Equally, we find that the Affirmative Action Fund and the Senate Oversight Funds may also muddy the issue in terms of on separation of powers, especially for the national government Affirmative Action Fund. Women representative is a member of the legislature and should not be involved in oversight of any funds, which, again, as I said, should go to the county or the national government. Establishment and entrenchment of state offices. We note that both the Prime Cabinet Secretary and the Leader of Official Positions are not there in the current legal framework. We suspect that as it is the Prime Cabinet Secretary, because has more powers than other ministers, is not an office that is as contemplated under our Constitution and is therefore probably unconstitutional. And if they are going to be embedded into our Constitution, they would need a referendum under the guidelines of Article 255, 256, and 257, and the interpretation of the Supreme Court judgment in the BBI case. In conclusion, basically, we're saying that we appreciate what has led us to this process, to the National Dialogue Committee that has actually stopped a spiraling of the situation as we saw earlier this year. And we appreciate that there is stability in this country, and that perhaps the problem in Kenya is not a constitutional one, it's mainly a political one. And so we urge the committee to, first of all, really reflect on implementation of the Constitution as is, because most of the issues outlined have to do with lack of fidelity to the Constitution itself, rather than really problems with our laws.